Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation. And I'm so sorry. I was really intending to be there in person, but I'm struggling with a few health issues at the moment, while at the same time trying to finish a book on Gaza and Yemen. And I basically have been told not to travel at the moment. So I'm really, really sorry about that. I remember with great fondness my last trip to Hastings, where we had a great meeting. But I think this one is, if anything, much bigger. I'm really, really impressed to hear the breadth of groups that have joined together to organize tonight's meeting. And I truly hope that there are people sitting amongst you in that very beautiful building who don't actually belong to any of those organizations. Because one of the things that I've found over the last few months, while I've been speaking at probably 3 to 4 meetings a week around the country, which probably explains my health problems at the moment, is how many people are turning up, not just who've been long-time activists, who've been involved in our local organizations, but people who haven't really been involved politically before. And this is the crux of what we need this new party to be. It's not about creating yet another political party to take its place amongst the other careerists in our council or at Westminster. It's about creating a totally new type of politics in Britain, not just for the short term, not for the medium term, but for the very long term. Because the reality is that our politics are broken. I truly hope none of you wasted a few hours this afternoon listening to my MP Keir Starmer's speech at the Labour Party conference. Jeremy Corbyn described it as the longest resignation speech in history. It certainly felt that way. It offered nothing but a series of buzzwords and empty, meaningless rhetoric in the face of some of the worst challenges that this country has faced in decades and decades. We have a situation, as all of you know from your daily experience, of an ongoing cost of living crisis, where the government's solution is simply to put all of the pressure on ordinary people, make us pay more for everything, so that his billionaire donors and corporate mates can continue to make record profits, receive record bonuses and increases to their indefensible salaries. But linked to that, and by no means separate from it, is our ongoing, not just facilitation of the world's first live-screen genocide in Gaza, but our active participation in it. Why do I say that? Well, the RAF flies more spy flights over Gaza than the Israeli Air Force itself does. And those flights provide real-time intelligence information to the Israeli military. This is the information that is used for what they ironically describe as targeting, the obliteration of entire cities, of entire towns, of entire neighborhoods is not targeting. That's just brutal, genocidal carpet bombing. But when targeting does take place, it is to kill key health workers, key journalists, and their entire families. And Keir Starmer is as responsible for that as Benjamin Netanyahu. And that's why a few weekends ago, thousands of us marched in Starmer's own constituency where I live, telling him not only that we didn't want him in Holborn and St Pancras. Not only that we don't want him in the borough of Camden, we want him out of the UK, and we will personally carry him to The Hague, where he deserves to face trial for the commission of war crimes and involvement in genocide. So why are these things linked to the cost of living crisis? Well, in two key ways. The first is that, as I'm sure most of you find, I live in central London, which is absurdly expensive. We pay amongst the highest rentals in Britain. At the moment, we are all paying as much in energy bills as we are in rental. Why? Because the government, both the Tories and Labour, have dismantled any meaningful regulation of the energy companies. They are pouring more public money into the water companies so that the senior executives can pay themselves record bonuses after a year in which their main accomplishment was to deposit tons and tons of feces in our rivers. The French energy company EDF, which I'm unfortunate to have as my energy provider, is only allowed to increase costs by 4% a year in its home country of France. In Britain, that figure is 78% and rising. It really feels to me like we walk down the street every day, the government knocks us over the head with a cricket bat, and while we are groggy, corporations simply empty whatever money or cards we have in our pockets. This is a robber baron economy, and we're all suffering. But the money that should be going to benefits that have been cut, that should be going into the NHS, that should be going into education, into public transport, and of course, into addressing the climate crisis that we face as a planet, that money is all being diverted to defense spending. Keir Starmer's government has increased defense spending by between 9 and 10% during its first year in office. For 2027, it has promised a £15.4 billion a year increase in the amount of money that is given to our corrupt companies like BAE Systems, Rolls-Royce, and Kinetic that are working with the Israeli Defense Force to slaughter innocent Palestinians. Why is that so important to our government? Well, because a huge amount of the massive corruption in the arms trade comes back to feed our political system and our major political parties. The biggest donor to Starmer's Labour Party at the last election was a financial entity called Quadrature Capital. Their investments are exclusively in fossil fuels and defence. Because of the decisions taken by Starmer's government in its first few weeks in office to basically put a hold on any new green energy plan and also to massively increase defence spending, the asset value of Quadrature Capital increased by billions of pounds for an investment of a donation of around £5 million. And that is why, in Britain, as in so much of the Western world, we have the best democracy money can buy. Our politics are broken. They are not fit for purpose. And that is why we need a new party. It's important for me to explain to you what my role has been in the process, why I'll be able to answer certain of your questions, but perhaps not others. Initially in this process, Jeremy Corbyn put together what was first called the MOU group in its initial form and then became known as the Organising Committee as it expanded to about 25 people who were guiding this process initially. There were then some issues around leadership and around whether we should have a sole leader or co-leadership. After that process, when Jeremy and Zara were announced as co-leaders, the organizing committee didn't continue to operate, and instead, decision-making power and the driving of this process was put in the hands of the 6 Independent Alliance MPs in Parliament. Now, that process since then has been slow and has not been without its own problems, as you would have seen. The main issues that have arisen, because I want to make one thing clear. We mustn't be scared of debate. We mustn't be scared of differences. If we're going to create a new kind of politics to lead us out of the mess that we're in, and to create a Britain in which everyone is treated equally and with the respect and dignity each person in this country deserves, then we're going to have to accept that we need to create a broad movement based on certain key, inviolable principles and values. But within that broad movement, it is not a problem to have differences of opinion. It is not a problem to debate issues, as long as we do so respectfully and productively, so that we actually move to resolution that we can practically take forward. So the issues that have caused concern have been issues around control of the data, in other words, the details of the almost 800,000 people who've signed up, and the control of the money. The data situation has been a complicated one, and I can't claim to fully understand it. As I now understand it, everything has been consolidated, and there is one database. That database urgently needs to be made available to local groups like your own, so you can know exactly who has signed up in your area and how you can contact them. On the financial side, I can speak with a little more authority. When the group was very small, called the MOU, 3 of us, for our sins, and I'm not exactly sure what they were, might have had something to do with an ability to count. 3 of us, as in Jamie Driscoll, the former executive mayor of the Northeast region in Newcastle, Beth Winter, former South Wales Member of Parliament, and myself were made the signatories of the MOU bank account. All of the monies of those who originally signed up were paid into that bank account, and in the second tranche, when a membership portal was set up and people signed up to that, that money has come into the same account. All those membership details have now been consolidated, as I've said. All of that money is in one account. And I can give you the undertaking, and I should just say here, that my role in the South African Parliament was to draft South Africa's public sector financial management legislation. I was then the senior ANC member on the Public Accounts or Main Financial Oversight Committee, and I exposed a massively corrupt arms deal that my own party had engineered. And it led to my resignation from Parliament because the then President Thabo Mbeki would not allow an unfettered investigation into the $500 million of corruption in that deal. So I'm not a person who is about to allow money to be in any way misused or inappropriately used. The 3 of us as signatories will hand over that money to the new party entity in order to fund and plan the launch conference, and for the first few months of the new party after the conference, once there are registered legal structures in place. And that registration process is well underway at the moment, and we are working closely with Jeremy and with Zara to ensure that everything that is required from the basis on which people made their donations is put in place so that money can be transferred to the new registered entity. No money has been spent to date, and no money will be spent until we have in place what the people who donated that money assumed they were donating the money for. And anybody who wants their money refunded will be able to do that once it has been transferred to the new entity. Now, those are the things that have caused the ructions. There are two additional things I'd like to say about that. The first is that I think as we build this new, what I prefer to call movement party, because I think it essentially needs to bring together our social movements, be it around Palestine, be it around poverty and inequality, be it around all of the other issues that you have organized in Hastings and people have organized in locally around the country. This needs to be brought together with electoral ambitions. The two, in my opinion, cannot be separated. But we have to make sure that we don't give way to what I describe as parliamentarianism, which sees, and I say this as someone who spent 7.5 years in South Africa's first democratic parliament. People who sit in parliament, from my own experience, sometimes think that parliament is the center of the universe. It is not. The center of the myriad universes are our communities. And unless the corridors of power, be they our councils or our national parliament, are reflecting the needs and wishes of our local communities across this country, they're not serving their purpose. A purpose, may I remind you, for which we pay a lot of money as taxpayers. The second thing I would like to caution against, and I say this as someone who worked for someone who was a myth in his own lifetime, Nelson Mandela. The politics of personality are very, very dangerous. This party, as much as I love and respect them, is not about Jeremy and or Zara. It's not about any of the leadership figures. It is about each and every one of us. Now, what does that mean? It means that as we move forward to build this party, we have to ensure that at every stage of the process, we have a democratic process that is transparent and accountable, because that is the sort of party we want. And if the formation of the party is not done on those same political principles, then there is very little chance the party will conform to those core practices and values. And who is going to ensure that democracy, that transparency, and that accountability? It is you, all of you sitting in this hall today, and many, many more of you around the country. You need to have meaningful discussions around what you want that conference to look like. Do we have mechanisms to ensure that everybody who signed up has the ability to have their voice heard? Are there technological ways to do that? Do we want to adopt something that has been mooted that I don't fully understand called sortition, which is that a computer just randomly determines who is going to be invited to the launch conference? Or are we going to put in the work to ensure that we have local organizations that are representative and broad, and that it is delegates from those local structures who are delegated with local positions to attend the conference, but also to provide the technological mechanisms so that everybody can at least observe that conference, because that is what transparency is about. So how do you go about doing this? Well, the crucial thing that I would strongly encourage you to do at the moment is to get your thoughts together through open, vigorous discussion, remembering that it's okay to have different opinions, that you try and persuade each other of why you hold the opinion you do, but also listen to the other people who might have a view different to your own to see if there is any merit in what they're saying and come up with solutions that you all feel comfortable with. You then communicate that both through the Your Party email and, if you would like to the emails of both Jeremy and Zara. His public emails are well known to all of us. They are their parliamentary emails, making clear what you in Hastings want. The time for top-down politics is long past. The time for participative, mass-based movement party politics is what the future holds. And that is what we are trying to build. Finally, let me say to you, amidst all of these ructions, amidst all of these growth pains, and real democracy is messy and it's a difficult thing to do, but we've got to do it. While we are doing it, let us constantly remind ourselves that while we do have differences, that what unites all of us sitting in this hall, and I would argue the vast majority in all of our communities, what unites us is far, far greater than those things that might divide us. And it is on those things that unite us that we must focus to take on the entire political establishment, which in my opinion runs all the way from the Lib Dems straight through Keir Starmer's Labour Party, heading towards the Tories, and as his teacher once described him, all the way to that nasty little racist Nigel Farage. And we can do this only if we work together positively and constructively. Thank you very much. Rather than go question by question, I'm going to put certain things together so that I don't take hours responding. There were a number of people who made the comparison to the 1930s in Germany. There is a well-worn phrase that fascists don't arrive in uniform and marching boots. They often arrive in suits and ties. And we have to understand the gravity of the moment we're in. The late neoliberal capitalist era has effectively captured our state and our politicians and political parties to further the profits of capital. We now see many of the so-called captains of industry in positions of political power. Donald Trump, Nigel Farage, and his millionaire, if not billionaire, leadership mates in the Reform Party. Those who are not themselves obscenely rich believe that they should be, people like Keir Starmer, and therefore they do the bidding of the super wealthy. The one thing that is clear about this politics is that it is fundamentally anti-democratic and authoritarian, because that is the only way that you can maintain a system in which ordinary people are effectively being robbed every single day. We've experienced 10 years of this with Starmer in Holborn and St. Pancras. He's now just exported it to the country as a whole. I'm not sure whether he is a remarkably scheming human being or whether he's just a dumb puppet. And I'm not sure which of those would be more dangerous. When the one speaker spoke about facing terrorism charges, it reminds me that the only way we face this authoritarianism and this fascism head on is with that sort of courage that we've seen in support of the struggle of the Palestinian people. We have been told that to oppose a genocide, to support the Palestinian struggle, to oppose the genocidal actions of the Israeli state, terrorism, and is anti-Semitic. As the son of a Holocaust survivor who lost many of her family at Auschwitz, where I've lectured on genocide prevention, as the person who introduced the first ever motion in the history of the South African Parliament on the Holocaust, the days of the anti-Semitism smear are over. When any one of us is attacked as a terrorist, as an anti-Semite, the only way we win these battles is for all of us to stand together. We will not allow this pathetic name-calling to have any role in our politics anymore. We know that the Israeli government and Keir Starmer's Labour Party actively weaponize anti-Semitism to try and stop criticism. Every time we are called a terrorist, we are called an anti-Semite, we have to stand up, not as an individual, but as hundreds, if not thousands of us, and repeat the statements that we have made about our support for Palestine, our abhorrence of the genocide that we are effectively paying for as British taxpayers. And on that, there can be no compromise. The great thing recently is that a few weekends ago, the Sunday Telegraph ran an article in which an unnamed organization had yet again called me an anti-Semite for naming two of Keir Starmer's largest donors, both of whom happen to be unbelievably supportive of Israel. They didn't name the organization because it was something called the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, which is a bunch of criminal thugs. And if they'd named the organization, none of the 5 people who read the article would have read it. The fact that only 5 people read the article shows that even people who aren't politically attuned, who read a paper like the Sunday Telegraph, realize that this has all been and is a nonsense. That's what solidarity is. That's what unity is, standing together when we are attacked. And that is how we see off fascism, with solidarity for every person who comes to this country in need of security and refuge. For every person whose gender and or sexual identity might not be to the liking of certain people. Why should anybody else be in a position to determine how someone identifies in terms of their gender or their sexuality? It's an absurdity to me. At the same time as having said that, let me say that anti-Zionism as an ideology, because both Zionism and anti-Zionism are ideologies, and anti-Zionism from its inception was more Jewish than Zionism. Zionism was as much a creation of a combination of anti-Semites in the West who wanted rid of their Jewish populations and insane evangelical Christians who believe in something called the rapture. to which actually the Jewish people are totally dispensable. When their moment for eternal heaven, as they claim, comes, the Jews who haven't accepted Jesus Christ into their lives, according to these people, will have an afterlife of eternal damnation. I mean, what is this nonsense? These are the people who, along with a minority of Jews, developed the ideology of Zionism. And I am told as a proud Jew that to be anti-Zionist is somehow anti-Semitic. For goodness sake. But this brings us to the other way in which we push back the advancing fascism. It is by the courageous protests. It is by standing together in solidarity, but it is also by engaging. Now, I quoted what Nigel Farage's teacher had described him as, and I have no doubt that he is a nasty little racist. I do not believe that everybody who supports reform is necessarily racist. I believe that a lot of people are desperate. They're desperate for the same reasons all of us are desperate. And they believe erroneously that Farage and his fellow multimillionaires and billionaires are somehow a part of the solution, just as a lot of Americans see the orange one as part of the solution. I shudder to think what the problem is, that any of these people are part of a solution too. All they are doing is they are very slick, manipulative communicators who are using various tropes in order to solidify their position at the apex of neoliberal capitalism. But the way we change people's minds is not by labeling them all as racists, but rather by engaging with them. And that is why a crucial thing that we need to do in our communities and beyond our communities is we need to talk to people who have different views to ourselves. And we have to use the power of our arguments to persuade them why this new movement party is a legitimate home for them as well. As we transitioned in South Africa from racism to democracy, in white areas where the vast majority of people had supported apartheid for decades, we went door to door. We organized what we described as rolling house meetings, where we would ask someone to host a meeting of 10 or 15 of their friends. And we would talk to them and explain to them that actually Nelson Mandela was quite a kindly grandfatherly figure rather than the communist ogre the apartheid state had claimed. How he wasn't coming for your house, your children, your cars, your rugby, your cricket. And that in fact, at his treason trial, he'd stood up and said, I'm opposed to white domination over black, but I am as much opposed to black domination over white. This is a cause that I have lived for, and it is a cause for which I am prepared to die. 90% of the people we spoke to never knew Nelson Mandela had said that. And that is why we need to get on the doorstep. We need to arrange similar house meetings, and we need to engage with people who believe that it is those desperate individuals arriving on boats who are in any way a part of the problem, rather than actually a symptom of the wars that we have precipitated around the world. And that many of us, and I say this as a very proud immigrant, and when I say that in meetings in some areas, people say to me, no, but you can't be an immigrant. And I say, why not? And they say, why? Because you're white. This is the sort of nonsense of discourse that exists in our country at the moment. And we have to explain to people that the vast majority of us are ultimately immigrants to this country. And that those who have arrived in this country, often in very difficult circumstances, have contributed an extraordinary amount. And we've got to find ways of communicating that. Be aware of people who are immigrants who might actually be the sporting heroes of their local teams. Be aware of their own experience in their own area that we can use to show them that they're following of people like Starmer and Farage, who simply have a slightly different theatre performance, are all the same, and how we are going to offer a real solution. Now, I heard a lot of things about specific policies and specific ideas. I can't be with you today and say, oh, yeah, that is definitely going to be the position of this party, or that is definitely going to be the position of the party. It is up to you to ensure that it is the position of the party. We have got to ensure that there is sufficient democracy at the launch conference where all of these things should be determined, that we are able to have a party with a name that most of us like, with a program that the vast majority of us can get behind, because we have been a part of producing them. Now, the reality is that at the moment, we have to stand up and admit that the communications from your party have been abysmal. Why? Because there are no employed people at this point. The only people who actually do this full time are the 6 members of parliament. And 4 of them have only been in parliament for a year and a bit. So they're not particularly experienced politicians. We have no staff. Everything is being done voluntarily at the moment. That is going to start changing very soon. But what is most important is that you start communicating with the leaders that there are about the sort of process and party that you want to build. For instance, the issue of membership of other parties. I don't know where that came from. Some individual who clearly hadn't thought it through, who was thinking as though they were still in the Labour Party of 5 years ago. Because if that were to be the policy of this party, we don't have to worry about a leadership argument, because Jeremy Corbyn couldn't be a member of the party, because he's also a member of Islington Community Independence, just like I'm a member of Camden People's Alliance. So there are some things that people say or do that are ridiculously stupid. And Jeremy has already corrected that. So we need to go into this conference with all of these things in our mind. And that is why you are having the sort of meeting that you are having tonight, to figure out exactly what it is that you as a community want to communicate. Let me just very quickly, just a couple of other things that I want to say. The role of trade unions is obviously central. We have a problem in Britain today. We have some very good union leaders and we have some very problematic union leaders. At one point, the General Secretary of the largest trade union confederation in this country said that the situation of her members was far more important than anything that was happening in a genocide thousands of miles away. How you can't link those two things and actually be encouraging your members who work in the defense sector simply to down tools when it comes to making weapons for Israel. Why you can't be demanding that the government at local, regional, and national levels be investigating how we can diversify skills out of the defense sector into far more socially and economically productive sectors, like new forms of energy, technological education, health solutions that are driven by technology, all of which are the very skills that people working in the defense sector have, and ensure that that transition happens without people losing their incomes. This is what our union leadership should be focused on. Now, there are certain smaller unions who have already indicated a desire to be a part of this new emerging structure, but they are the smaller ones, and they have tended to be more radical and have broken with the Labour Party. I really liked a lot of the sentiment that was coming from people who play a role in trade unions locally about using motions in your local branches, in your TUC, to push these agendas. The trade union relationship has to come from both sides. The new party can't just say, yes, trade unions, you have to affiliate with us. It is going to be a process of persuasion, and the majority of members are going to have to demand that of their leadership. Finally, let me say, if this isn't going to be a left party, then I don't know what the tens of thousands of people I've been meeting with are on about. Yes, of course, there are differences in emphases. There are differences in priorities. That's a good thing. That's why a collective, in my opinion, makes so much better decisions than an individual. Because we bring a myriad of experiences, a myriad of foci, a myriad of priorities, and then we discuss them. So, of course, this is going to be a left party. What the program looks like, you have to start inputting about. What the priorities that you've mentioned tonight certainly all chime with me and my politics. You've got to ensure that you get that message across to the leadership at the conference when it happens. So again, let me finally say, and I'm sorry to have repeated this so often, what you are doing tonight, what you have to continue doing, is going to be the determinant of the success or failure of this new movement party. And as a number of you have indicated in your remarks, you've encapsulated a view that a woman called Margaret Mead, who was the first woman to get a PhD at Harvard, said at the end of her extraordinary career and life, when she said, history is changed by the actions of groups of committed individuals working together. It has always been the case, and it always will be. The task is huge. The challenges are gargantuan. The entire establishment media, which we haven't even spoken about tonight. Parts of the new media that are totally insane, in my opinion. They're all going to be against us. Those who hold power do not give it up willingly or voluntarily. It has to be taken from them. But I am fortunate to come from a struggle and a politics that had at least partial success in liberating South Africa from apartheid, not from the economic consequences of apartheid, which continue today, but from the racist dimensions of apartheid. So I have had the experience of seeing a movement faced with what seemed like extraordinarily powerful opponents. And we triumphed. We triumphed because history was always on our side, as it is today. And we triumphed then, as we will today, because we are the many and they are the few. Thank you.